A man uncovered a hidden fortune of $7.5 million after buying a storage unit for only $500. What began as a routine auction soon became the discovery of a lifetime, or maybe a nightmare. When he opened the storage container and saw its contents, he was left speechless. Just hours later, a knock at his door revealed a swarm of police officers, and he quickly realized he wasn't prepared for what was coming next. Bidding on storage units had become a risky hobby for him, one where he often spent money he didn't have, gambling on the hope of finding something valuable. Stories of people striking it rich kept him going, filled with tales of finding priceless antiques or even vintage cars that paid off big. Until now, he had barely managed to break even by selling off the random contents he found. It was tedious work, sorting through someone else's discarded belongings, cleaning, and searching for buyers. If this unit didn't hold something special, he was ready to quit. Joe, standing among a crowd of 15 to 20 curious onlookers, was eager to see what treasures, if any, the 5x15 unit held. The unit was large enough to store an entire apartment's worth of items, furniture, bikes, and even sports equipment, but it was impossible to peek inside. Yet the thrill of bidding kept him hooked, unlike the chaotic scenes on TV where bidders shouted and pushed for dominance. This auction was relatively calm, though the excitement was real. Joe loved the rush of competing in a bidding war, even if he knew he needed to stick to his budget. But every time his restraint faltered, he found himself caught up in the moment. This time, the container was packed tightly with furniture and what seemed like other valuable items. A woman standing behind Joe kept raising the bid, starting at a steep $100. Joe countered, but she kept pushing it higher. The back and forth continued, driving up the price. $350, $400, $150. Joe became determined to win. At $500, the bidding finally ended, and Joe stood victorious but shaken. He'd had just spent a fortune by his standards. Now there had better be something extraordinary inside. At $350, Joe was certain he had the upper hand, but the bidding kept climbing. $400, $450, $470, and his competition refused to back down. It wasn't until the price hit $500 that the bidding finally stopped. Joe stood there, exhausted and trembling, realizing just how much he had gambled. Now, whatever was inside that unit had better be worth it. As soon as a winner was declared, the crowd dispersed. Most people had lost interest now that they had nothing to gain, but a handful stayed behind, curious to see what treasures, or junk, Joe had just paid $500 for. They watched as he cautiously stepped into the 5x15 unit, his heart racing. The space was crammed with old furniture, barely leaving enough room to walk. Sweat trickled down his neck. This wasn't looking promising. The value of the furniture alone wouldn't come close to covering his bid. Then he spotted it, a small, unassuming gray box lying on the floor beside a chest of drawers. It wasn't flashy, but Joe immediately recognized it for what it was, a safe. No fancy special effects, no dramatic reveal, just a plain safe that could hold anything or nothing at all. He called his friends over to help crack it open, knowing the chances of finding a key were slim. After some quick work with a power drill, the safe gave way. What they found inside was jaw-dropping. Piles of cash, stacks of $50 bills spilling out as the lid was lifted. Joe literally fell backward from the shock, overwhelmed by the sight of so much money. Once he got to his feet, he began pulling out bundle after bundle of cold, hard cash. But Joe's good fortune didn't last long. Less than 2 hours after his incredible discovery, a knock at the door brought a wave of police officers to the scene. Panic set in. What had he gotten himself into? Who leaves that much money stuffed in a storage unit? In his excitement, Joe had made a mistake. He had shared photos of the cash with his girlfriend and plastered them all over social media. It didn't take long for the police to show up. Though he hadn't counted it all, he estimated he had already found over $1 million. But as he left the container to talk to the officers, he realized that his windfall might not be as straightforward as it seemed. In total, There was a staggering $7.5 million hidden inside various safes throughout the storage unit, ranging from nickels to $100 bills and car titles. However, there was one massive issue. The original owner had caught wind of the discovery and quickly hired high-powered attorneys to reclaim the fortune. Joe was in deep trouble. Things escalated rapidly once the police arrived. Soon after, Joe received a call from the lawyers, who made it clear he had to return the money. However, they offered a deal. He could keep $600,000 as a finder's fee. Joe was torn and needed to think fast. After consulting with his friends, he discovered that under California law, once a storage unit is sold at auction, the contents legally belong to the buyer. He had every right to keep what he found, but the lawyers weren't backing down. To sweeten the deal, they raised the offer to $1.2 million. Playing hardball, Joe knew he was dealing with powerful people. But the question remained, who forgets $7.5 million in an unpaid storage unit? As Joe mulled over the situation, he wrestled with two conflicting thoughts. On one hand, $1.2 million was a life-changing sum, but it was nowhere near the full amount he had in his hands just hours ago. On the other hand, he couldn't shake the moral question. Even though he hadn't done anything to earn the money, was it really right to give it back? After considerable thought and mounting pressure, Joe decided that splitting the money evenly was a fair solution. The previous owners, after all, had ignored rent payments on the unit for almost a year, despite multiple reminders from the storage company, resulting in the auction. Reflecting on this, a storage facility owner explained, "Auctions mainly help us recover losses. 90% of the time, we don't recoup what's owed. A unit may cost us $600 in unpaid rent, but if the winning bid is only $400, we're still at a loss. We need delinquent tenants out so paying ones can move in."